the song, hear the silence, hear the voice in you, the echo of their greeting, that in time shall be heard. Doesn't it all seem so profound?
Welcome to the Gathering Collective's 5th event. We've been marking significant nights on the Celtic calendar since Samhain, and now we're at Beltane, which is a very, very important night in our calendar. It's a moment to start new fires, to find new energy, and to look forward. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We have to do a bit of housekeeping. We're doing two halves tonight. The first half will be us, Gathering Collective, with our guest, Daniel Alison, who are very, very pleased to be joining us tonight. He is an author and a traveller and a podcaster and a storyteller. And in no small way, he is protecting the future of myth and legend in our country, in Scotland. And also in the Gathering Collective, we've got Maria Gillen, who's in Ireland. And we've got Kama, who's in the beautiful Welsh countryside just now. Where are you, Kama? Exactly. Oh, she's on mute.
I'm on mute. Sorry. So I'm on the edge of Lake Llyn, which is just near to Nantmel, in between Rhaeadr and Llandrindod. Yeah. So that's me.
Oh wow. And where are you, Maria? In the forest, the fairy forest.
I'm at the source of the Lee McGilvery in Cork City. So it's St. Brendan's country, and we're lighting the fires of Ishnach tonight.
Oh, and a kiss. Yeah, so tonight we'll take the first half, and then the second half we'll throw over to you guys. And we've got some incredible and very diverse storytellers, mostly from Scotland or based in Scotland tonight. So that's really exciting. We're so pleased you could be here. We couldn't do this without support from our partners. We are supported by Carad Art Centre in Ryder and by Kerry Writers Museum, and most recently by Argyll Arts, who promote arts all across the Cowal Peninsula in Argyll and the west coast of Scotland, which is where I am right now. I can't move too much because you'll see the cement mixer, but if you just look over my right shoulder, you'll see the beautiful Loch Goil Head. We're in the edge of the Trossachs National Park here. And I'm so pleased to welcome you all, to gather you into Loch Goil Head and Argyll right now. So what else have I got to say? Make yourselves at home. You're already at home, but I can't say that for much longer because we're getting out. We're looking to the future. We're looking forward. To start tonight, we're going to have a song from Lee, who is also called aka Flew the Arrow, and he's my friend. He's another Ayrshire boy, and he has got his recent EP out, so you can check him out on Spotify and all the other platforms. I think that's all. I think we should get started. So over to you, Lee. Oh wait, we are being recorded. If you'd rather not have your face shown, just put your screen off, and we'll make sure you're not on that. Anything I've missed? Nah. Okay, over to you, Lee. Take it away.
Hello, folks. How you doing? What a pleasure it is to be part of this show tonight. Thank you for having me. I want to show you a little song that I wrote not so long ago, a little kind of folk legend of my own about the huntress. It's about a young man who lives in a little village on the end of a great valley, and he grows up hearing stories about the huntress when he was younger, and he begins to dream about her and to hear her songs in his sleep, and he's compelled to go to the forest to find her. And I'll leave the song up to the rest, but yeah, this one's called Huntress. Is the guitar okay? Can you hear clearly? Sweet. deep in the forest of old, there lives a huntress, I'm told, for I can faintly hear her singing. Song sung from the beaks of the bird, every calling and urgent words beckons me to her lay. Till leads me down to the edge of the wood, and so I go seeking. From atop of the tallest tree, as far as the eyes can see, there she lays upon the fell, with her bow and her arrow. She draws sharp and narrow, and she sit close within my sight. It's then that I knew that the stories were true, and how I heard her calling. Yeah. As the arrow did fly through the night, the huntress that lay by my side and whispered softly in my ear, love will find thee so free, my boy. For now I must find my joy. Just see me call him and I sing. The call of the country comes. So she flies with her feather and drum, for by the lakes her heart does lie. And I know soon again she'll be gone. So for now I must sing this song, and I'll be listening for her calling. The strangest of dreams occurred in my sleep, as I wake in the morning. Breathe in the open air, and know that I'll find her there, in this land and in the sky. Time, all that will be, and I'll be waiting with my stings and speed, and other lives I'm sure to live. So endlessly her light leads me on, in the song of the siren. As the arrow did fly through the night, the huntress that lay by my side and whispered softly in my ear, love will find thee so free, my boy. For now I must find my joy. Just hear me calling and I sing. Yep. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That song is called Huntress. Cheers. That's going to be the next song I'm going to be releasing this summertime, so keep your eyes and ears open for it.
Thanks very much, Lee. That was fantastic. I'll take the reins now then. Hi everyone, so Daniel Alison. I'm here in the Lammermuir Hills in East Lothian, or East Lothian as I like to call it. And I've been up since before dawn, went up the hill, washed my face in the dew, so feeling very Beltane and feeling very glad to be here with you. Give me a quick thumbs up to tell me, show if you can hear me all right. Brilliant, or even better, thank you, Lee. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a story of the Fianna. In case you don't know them, the Fianna were a group of warriors led by Finn McCool. You might have heard of him. And their job was to keep the shores of Scotland and Ireland safe from invaders. And when they weren't doing that, they were feasting, they were fighting, and they were making their own trouble. And the story that I want to tell you is a really beautiful story. It's not so much about Finn as it is about Dermot O'Doone, who is Finn's right-hand man, the Lancelot to his King Arthur, if you will. And it's a story called The Daughter of King Underwave. And I'd like to introduce it with a bit of didgeridoo. Now, the ethnomusicologists among you will probably be aware that the didgeridoo is not a Scottish instrument, it's an Australian one. But we did have carnixes back in the day. The Celts had these war horns that are like didgeridoos, and I've heard them played, and you can play them just like a didgeridoo. So I do like to fancy they like to get down to tunes like this to start the story. So this is The Daughter of King Underwave. The wind howled like a god tormented. The waves rose up to strike the stars. Trees crashed to the forest floor, and no beast or man was aboard the night she came. 3 men of the Fianna set out that morning, that Beltane eve, from their hunting cabin on the Isle of Skye. There was a storm rolling in from the west, but they judged they had time to get in a hunt, so off they went, jogging over the moors towards the foothills of the Black Cullen Mountains, Bran and Scolan, Finn's hounds, racing ahead of them. And they joked and they laughed as they surged over the moors. They reached the hills, the mountains, and Bran Scolan startled a stag. They gave chase, and the hunters laughed as the storm rolled in over the ocean. And the hunters were clever, but not clever enough. The hounds were quick, but not quick enough. And come evening, they admitted defeat, gave in, and they trudged home back towards their cabin as the storm finally broke above them. There was no singing, no laughing really by the fire that night. Quietly, wearily, they just made the foods and ate their food, and Bran and Scolan got comfortable among the furs as they rolled out their sleeping skins, and pretty soon after they'd eaten, they all lay down to sleep round by the fire. And they closed their eyes and they sank into sleep as the storm sang and the storm raged. Finn slept. Oisin slept. Dermot slept. And wild was the song of the storm, but so deeply did they sleep that not one of them awoke when, in the deepest hour of the night, the door to the cabin slammed open, and in walked, into the cabin, shuffled into the cabin, hurpled the foulest being in all the worlds. She was an old woman. Her skin like her hair like matted cobwebs, reaching down to her gnarled, scaly feet. She wore festering, moldy animal skins. Her jaw jutted forward like a serpent's snout. The skin hung from her face, revealing putrid flesh and bone beneath. And she hurtled through the cabin, and her eyes alighted on Finn. And she approached Finn, and she knelt down next to him, and she said, Finn McCool. And he woke up and, yeah, what do you want? And she says, I want warmth. I want comfort. I want a strong man's arms around me on this cold night. Be kind, Finn. Let me in under the skins. And can I ask you, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Do you think Finn let her in under the skins? I'm seeing quite a few no's. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Finn, he was a good man, but he wasn't feeling charitable that evening. I see Simon's relieved. He didn't want to know what was going to happen next there. So Finn said, sorry, I love her. Maybe try somewhere else. And he turned around and somehow he got straight back to sleep. So over she went to Oisin. Oisin, poet, dear child, wake up. And Oisin woke up. Oisin, Finn's son, woke up. Who are you? I am an old woman in need of what an old woman needs. Warmth, comfort, a strong man's arms around me. Your father turned me away. He thinks me foul. Let me in under the skins. And Oisin was a kind man, a good man, a generous man, a man with a poet's heart, if that's a good thing. Tell me, thumbs up or thumbs down, did he let her in? No. Simon, you'll be relieved he did not let her in either. But on she went. Oh, through the cabin she went, bran and skull and waking up. And she crouched down next to Dermot O'Doone. Dermot. Who are you? What do you want? I want to lie down next to you, Dermot. The storm is raging outside. I am cold, I am wet, I am old. Please let me in under the skins just for this night. And Dermot, like Finn, like Oisin, was a good man, a kind man, a generous man. He wasn't keen on letting her into the skins, I'm not going to lie to you. But his kindness had its way, and he said, well, all right then, and you get just for tonight, you know. So in she got. And he said, well, good night then. And he turned over, you know, as you do in certain circumstances. And Dermot, he turns around. Yes, I want more than for you to lie down next to me. I want you to put your arms around me. Well, he didn't really want to do that. He didn't really like facing her. Breath was fetid and smelt like an open grave, but in for a penny, in for a pound. So he said, well, all right then. And he put his arms around her, said, well, good night then. Dermot. Yes. I want more than to have your arms around me. You probably know where this is going, Simon. You probably don't like it. What is it you want? I want you to kiss me. One kiss, just one kiss from Dermot O'Doone will keep me warm every night for the rest of my days. One kiss, if I can tell people that I kissed the legendary Dermot, the handsome lover. Oh, please, Dermot, just one kiss. How many kisses have you given out? How many women? And it's true, you know, he'd given out quite a few kisses to quite a few women. And, you know, he generally could have his choice, you know, at any feast. He was Dermot O'Doone, he was handsome. And he just, not just handsome, you know, he had that way about him, you know, where he didn't really have to do anything. They just, this woman, not really his type, but again, his kindness had its way. And he said, well, all right, then, one kiss. And he leaned in, and she opened her mouth, and her little pointed tongue darted out, and her fetid breath made his face wet. And he and lo and behold, lying there, smiling at him, was the most beautiful maiden in all the worlds. And he laughed, and she smiled again, and she leant forward, and she kissed him, and he kissed her back, and no more words were spoken that night. And in the morning, Finn and Oisin, they woke up and they stretched out, and they got up, and they were just discussing the strange apparition that they'd both seen in their dreams when the door burst open, sunlight streamed in, bird song, birds chirping, and in walked this maiden, the most beautiful maiden they'd ever seen. And Finn tried to summon some words, but he could only dribble. And Oisin again was also trying to think of poetic words that would win her heart. But just as he opened his mouth, in walked Dermot. In walked Dermot. And he put his arm around this woman, and he kissed her, and he said, my friends, my brothers, I have something to tell you. I'm leaving. These years as a man of the Fianna have been the finest of my life. It's been the greatest honor a man could ever receive. But we're going to go away and just do our own thing now. Goodbye. And they were so shocked, you know, no men ever had such bonds as the Fianna had, that they just couldn't believe it. And they just kind of mouths flapped as Dermot and his lady turned and left. And off they went. They crossed sky, the sun shining down, and they made their way over to the mainland, and through Scotland they moved. And it was a summer, it's the kind of summer that, let's face it, we're all hoping to have this summer. Sunny days, flower-strewn meadows, deep kisses, beds of moths, roofs of stars, as they loved and sank deeper into one another. And eventually, they came to a bay somewhere up in the west, an arc of golden sand, mountains, islands dotting the distance. And Dermot looked out towards the headland, and he said, you know, if I could have my hole, you know, my dream hole, my home anywhere, I would have it there, just there. Dermot? Yes? You have it. Whoa, whoa! And it was there, just as he'd imagined it, right where he'd imagined it, his hole. And there was a dog, this beautiful wolfhound, running from the door towards him. And his bride said to him, Dermot, this is our home. This is my gift to the both of us. We are going to be happy here, but I must ask you one thing. Never, ever bring up how I looked the night I came to you. And he said, fine, fine. Never give away that hound of ours. Just as the dog ran up and licked his face. And she agreed, and they went into the house together. And so they lived there, and they climbed the mountains, and they hunted together, and they walked together, and they swam together, and they sat by the fire together, and they did all the things couples do together, and it was wonderful, and it was perfect. And one day, Dermot was out hunting when there was a knock on the door. His bride answered the door, and there was Finn McCool. Finn McCool, what an honor. Come in, come in, come in. There was the hound lying there before the fire. Dermot had gone out alone. Sit down, sit down. Can I get you something to eat? Can I get you something to drink? Dermot's out, but he'll be so happy to see you. I'm sure he'll be back soon. Sit down, sit down. And so she tended to Finn's needs, and her and Finn had a good old chat, and it was all very nice. And eventually Finn said, look, I actually do need to be getting going now. But before I go, I'll come back soon. I'll come back soon and see Dermot. Before I go, can I ask you for something? Yes, yes, anything Finn McCool asks, you shall have here. Okay. Can I have that hound? Well, it's just, but you know how it was back then. You're all story lovers. You know how it was back then. You did not refuse a guest, a gift, something they'd asked for beneath your roof, no matter what it was. And so she thought, well, Dermot will understand. He'll understand. And so she gave the hound into Finn's keeping, and off went Finn with the hound. And when Dermot returned, he flew into a rage as mighty as the storm that night they had met. And he said, how dare you? How could you give away my hound? And when you came to me and I took you into my bed, and you, a hideous hag. And as soon as he spoke those words, gust of wind blew, and it was all gone. The house was gone. Everything, his bride, his wife was gone. There was nothing left. He was stood there on the bare, windy headland, nothing left of it all but a drop of blood on the grass. Dermot was a hunter, a tracker. He found another, and another, and he followed it down. He followed it down to the sand. He followed the track over the sand until he came to the place where the land met the water. And he looked out over the water. He looked into the water, and he knew what he had to do. Dermot took a step into the water, and then another step, and the water parted. He took another step and another step and another step, and then there was before him a tunnel leading beneath the water, beneath the waves, and down he went, down, 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 forever down, until Dermot reached the land under wave. Green grass beneath his feet, the sea above him, whales, fish in the great shoals moving up there, and roads, villages, houses, people fair and strange. And he walked and he ran and he looked, and everywhere he went, he saw people gathering together, and they were gathering together and they were saying to each other, have you heard, the daughter of King Underwave is dying. And on he went until he saw a spire before him, a spire that became a castle at the center of a city, and through the city gates he went. And he came to that castle, and he was admitted to the chamber the chamber at the center where the king sat, and Dermot stood there. He looked up at the king under wave. Tentacles dangled from his earlobes, his elbows, his chin. Crabs scuttled across his skin. He wore a gown of whale skins, and he looked down and listened as Dermot told his tale. Dermot told the full story, and when he had finished, the king under wave said, come with me. So Dermot went with him, and he led him up vast stairways and corridors until they came to the highest chamber in that spire, and there, in a white chamber, lying in a bed, was his bride, the daughter of King Underwave, dying. Her skin a deathly grey blue. And Dermot said, is there anything that can heal her? And the King Underwave said, yes, there is one thing. The cup of healing. The cup of healing, the water within it, liquid, will heal her, but it cannot be retrieved. For the cup of healing is kept within the walls of a Fomorian city at the farthest reaches of the ocean, and there is not a warrior beneath the sea with the skill or power or strength to retrieve it. And Dermot, I am a man of the Fianna, he said. I will retrieve it. I do not think you will, but it will do you no dishonor to try. So Dermot got the directions and off he went. He left the castle, he left the city, he left the kingdom under wave, and on down a road deep beneath the sea he went. And he went on, and he went down and down, and he went down and on 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 and on. And when he rested, when he took a little rest, he was frightened. For just before he left, the king under wave had said to him one thing: if you do make it back, and heal her, know this: she will hate you. If she puts that cup to her lips and drinks its liquid, she will hate you till the end of her days. So Dermot didn't stop often. He kept on going and he kept on going as whales swam above him and beings of legend that eat the whales and the beings lost to legend that feed on them, and on he went until he stood at the gates of the Fomorian city. He stood there, he looked up, and the horns rang out, announcing his arrival. The gates opened, and out trooped the Fomorian army. The Fomorians, some of them are beasts with the heads of men. Some of them are men with the heads of beasts. And there was huge Fomorian warriors riding beasts of the deep. There was warriors with great double-bladed axes. There was warriors with swords. There was warriors with spears, warriors with weapons of every kind. And it took all day for them to line up in great ranks until they surrounded Dermot in a vast circle. And when they were ready, they fell silent, and Dermot drew his sword. It had never sounded so lonely. The Fomorian horns blew again. They charged towards him, and Dermot emptied his mind of all but his beloved. It was all he needed. Like an arrow through the air, like a bull in its charge, like a scythe through grass, Dermot met the charge. Such fury had not been seen in the world since the gods themselves went to war. It was music, it was poetry, it was terrible and glorious, the death dance of Dermot O'Doone that set loose a legion of souls. When Dermot's death dealing was done, he walked through the gates of the now empty city and into the central chamber, and there was the cup of healing. He lifted it up, and carefully he ran with such skill and grace that he did not spill a drop. He ran all the way back to the kingdom under wave, to the castle at the center of the city, up the stairs until he reached that chamber at the top of the spire, and there was his beloved, giving out her last breaths. He put the cup to her lips. He tilted it and he stopped. She will hate you to the end of her days. It wasn't true. Emptied the liquid into her lips. She breathed a starling breath, and color flushed in her cheeks. And she sat up and she looked at him and said, Dermot, get out. And Dermot did not have the heart to argue. He couldn't bear it. He just turned around and left. Down, out the castle, through the streets of the city. He was just passing through the city gates. Dermot! He turned round. There she was. He walked back to her. She looked up at him. I do remember, she said. I do remember all that we shared. And so, let me give you this. And she reached out and she touched her finger tip to his forehead, just here. And he felt this little tss, and he said, what's that? And she said, go. And he walked away again. As he walked, he turned round and he saw her looking at her with this little half smile on her lips. He kept on going. He made his way back to the shore. He rejoined the Fianna. He reforged his life back again as a man of the Fianna, and he soon discovered what she had given him. She had given him a love spot. Any woman who looked upon that spot for even just a moment fell irrevocably in love with him till the end of her days. And he quite enjoyed that at first. I must say, he did quite enjoy that for a while, but he took to wearing a cap to cover it up, just as Lee does, because as Lee's found, it causes a bit of bother having every woman who sees you fall in love with you. So, he kept it covered up. Didn't always manage. There was a time when the cap fell from his head. It was actually at the wedding of Finn, when Finn was marrying Gráinne, daughter of the High King of Ireland, and Gráinne saw Dermot's love spot, and that set in course a great chain of events that I would love to tell you about, but I won't tell you them now. Now I'll just say that Dermot always remembered that woman, the daughter of King Underwave. And even later on in his life, even when he was lying there next to Gráinne, he would think of her, think of that little smile she gave him, and he would wonder if she smiled because she'd given him a blessing, or smiled because she'd given him a curse. And that's the story of the daughter of King Underwave. You can get it in my book, find it in my book, Finn and the Fianna. And thank you so much, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Daniel. I've heard your podcast. I've heard lots of your podcasts, and it's like such a treat to see you in as much full person as is possible at the moment, telling a story, and what an amazing story. So thank you so much. Amazing. Hooray, thank you. I want to stand up, but I've not really factored in the light dropping. So tell me, can you see me? Am I very dark? I think I am a bit dark, aren't I? I have to sit here on my knees, and I'll tell you like this.
Yeah, we see you best close to the camera.
I'll have to come close, yeah. Okay, no
It is
problem.
beautiful. We can hear your voice.
That's okay, that's good. There we go. Right, so I'm going to tell you a story from the heart of Wales. A lot of the stories that I like to tell are from the heart of Wales. And this story begins on the shores of this lake that I'm sitting by right now. It starts here. And there are certain places in the world that have a certain energy that runs through them. You can't quite put your finger on it, but there's just a special feeling, and this lake is one of those places. And I think that that's been true for generations, because for thousands of years, possibly even, because scattered all around here, there are Iron Age forts and remnants of past altars, I suppose. I don't know, I can't imagine what they are, but this has definitely been a special place for people for a very, very long time. And the story that I'm going to tell you about it starts at the beginning, or close to the beginning. It starts at the beginning, and this lake is here at the beginning. And at the beginning, by this lake, on the edge of the lake, there lived a god and a goddess. Now, this goddess, she was extraordinary. She was 7 foot tall. She had great fat thighs like tree trunks. She had bright red hair that was as red as the bracken that I can see on the hill just there. And one day, the goddess's stomach, she placed her hand on it, and all of a sudden she could feel a life beginning to grow inside of her. She turned to her husband. Husband, I think there's a life growing inside of me. The god, he placed his hand on her stomach, and gods are quite good at sensing these things. And he said, do you know what, wife? I think there is a life growing inside of you. And so it was. After 3 months, her stomach had swelled to full term. She placed her hand on her stomach again. Husband, she said, I think there might be 2 babies growing inside of me. He placed his hand on her stomach. I think you might be right, wife. And so it was. 8.5 months went by. It was May Day Eve. And the goddess begins to feel the straining of her stomach. She's sitting here on the edge of the lake. Her legs are wide. She holds onto her thighs and she pushes and she squeezes and she squeezes and she heaves, and out of her body pours a life, a baby boy. She lifts it into her arms. And I'd like to say it was a sweet little baby, but it was huge. It was a monster of a baby. It looked as though it must be 6 months old, and it had this thick black hair. And the first thing it did was it opened its eyes big and wide, and they were like deep, dark pools. It was like winter was inside his eyes. And as soon as this goddess saw these eyes, she was filled with this foreboding. And then the baby, it took its first breath. And as it took its first breath, this ice cold wind, it whistled around them. And suddenly this fog, it began to sink down, and it wrapped itself around them and it clung to their skin. Now, the goddess had made these 2 pendants for each of her babies, 2 golden pendants, identical. And she wrapped it around the little boy's neck. She looked into its eyes. "Your name," she said, "your name will be Gwyn ap Neath." But she couldn't admire her baby for too long because her body started to strain again. It strained and it strained, and sure enough, another baby slid out, a tiny little scrap of a thing, a little girl. She held it in her arms. Its eyes were wide, and when she looked into this little girl's eyes, she could see such wisdom. She could see the wisdom of the ancients, and she knew that everything would be okay. She wrapped the pendant around the baby's neck. Creidilad. Your name will be Creidilad. Now, it was a little bit more than an icy wind that began to build as that little boy took his first breath, because high up above their heads, a great storm was beginning to brew, a great storm. And it was like every time that little boy took a breath, he was sucking in a little bit of warmth from the air, from the earth. And as he grew bigger, it got colder and colder and colder and colder and wetter, and the days got shorter and darker and more miserable. And you know how time goes so slowly in winter? It was like that. Every single day was a drag to get through it. By the time he was 2 years old, it was so cold that the water on top of this lake, it had frozen solid, even in the middle of May. And it got colder and colder and colder for 7 long years. Now, this little boy, he was wild, completely wild. He was completely at home in the wilderness. As soon as he was big enough to walk almost, he would go out into the wilderness and he would shoot bows and arrows. And he was an amazing shot with an arrow. He could shoot a rabbit at 500 yards, and he would be out there all day long. Now, these 2 babies, even though they'd been born at exactly the same time, they could not have been more different. If he was wild, she was domestic. I don't even want to say domestic. She was studious. She was wise, and she felt this responsibility, Creidilad. She felt this responsibility to absorb all the wisdom of her mother and her father. She was the child of a god and a goddess, and she knew that she had to do great things. And so she studied and she studied and she tried to learn everything she could from her mother and her father. 10 years went by, 10 years of this long, dragging, endless winter. It was May Day Eve. Their birthday was coming up the next day. Now, Gwyn, he disappeared out as he did every day. And normally he would come back just a little time after the dark came. But on this day, he didn't come back. They waited and they waited. The hours went by until morning came and the boy still hadn't returned. They began to worry. The god and the goddess and Creidilad, they searched the whole of this landscape, his name echoing out across the hills. And as the hours went by, the panic began to rise in them. For 3 days and 3 nights they searched. It was as though he had vanished off the face of the earth. And then it was on the 3rd night. Creidilad was sitting on the edge of this lake and the sharp stones were cutting into her knees, and She just knew that her brother was gone, he was lost. And tears began to pour down her face. And that morning the sun rose in the sky, but this sun, it was different. It wasn't winter sun, it was big, it was round, it was hot. It rose in the sky and it burnt down on that lake. And it burnt down, and the ice on the top of the lake, it began to melt. For the first time in goodness knows how long, that watery surface of the lake emerged. And the light, it shone down through the water, and all of a sudden Credilad could see something glistening out in the water. She waded in. She reached her hand down under the water and she pulled it out. Her brother's pendant. Tears poured down her face. These sobs came from deep within her. And then, just as she was in the depths of her despair, she heard this voice from behind her. "What do you think you're doing? Crying? What have you got to cry about? Can you not see I have brought you the sun?" Credilad turned, and there was this boy about the same age as her. He was blonde, he was bronzed, he was beautiful, very beautiful. His name was Gwythyr. And he was right. I mean, it did seem as though he had brought the sun, because from that day on, the sun did not stop shining. If anything, as the days turned into weeks, the sun got bigger and hotter. Fresh growth began to spring up, and the plants, they reached full bloom. Soft rain fell on the hills, and everybody had such abundance, everything they could possibly need. The people grew fat. But Credilad was the first to think it, the first to know it, that her brother must come home. She was the first to notice that rot had begun to seep in at the roots of the trees. She was the first to notice that feathers had begun to fall from the backs of the birds. She was the first to notice that the animals looked dull and listless. Wales was beginning to rot. She went to Gwythyr. "Gwythyr, please, do you know where my brother is? Wales is beginning to rot. We cannot continue like this. This long and endless summer." "Shush," said Gwythyr. "Shush. Marry me, Credilad, and all will be well forever." And she didn't want to, but she knew that something had to happen, something had to change, and so she agreed. The wedding was set for May Day Eve. There was a great ceremony here on the edge of the lake, a great party, feasting and drinking. And then just in the heart of the night, suddenly this howling came, this horrible screeching howls. And it was like it went through them. It wrapped itself around them. It went into their very hearts. They put their hands over their ears. And then in that moment, the moon, it rose above the horizon, great big fat moon. And there, silhouetted in the moonlight, was a man on a horse. Around him were these dogs. They came running down the hill. And as soon as these dogs, these great big white dogs with red ears, they saw Credilad, they jumped up at her, they licked her as though they knew her. And then this man, he came down the hill and he just rode straight through the party and out the other side. And Credilad, she couldn't understand it, she couldn't explain it, but she wanted this man so much. She needed him. She was drawn to him like a moth is drawn to a flame. But she was married now. She could not go with him. That night she lay in her bed, Gwythyr beside her, fat and full of drink, snoring. And then she heard it. The sounds of the hounds, it went round her, through her, into her. She climbed out of bed, she went down to the shores of the lake. There on the other side of the lake was the man, shining in the moonlight. She ran as fast as she could. When he saw her, he turned his horse on its heel and rode away. "Wait," she shouted, "please, I need to speak with you. Please, will you wait?" But he just carried on riding. "Wait," she said, "please, can you wait?" And he stopped. And then he turned his horse on the heel again. And he started riding straight into the centre of the lake. "Stop," she said. "If you go into the centre of this lake, it will suck you down, it will suck you in." and she didn't know why, but she found herself following him. It was like she could not stop. He was up to the horse's knees, up to the horse's shoulders. It was deep in the lake. Now she was up to her knees, up to her waist, up to her shoulders. She was swimming deep out into the middle of the lake. And then as she reached the middle of the lake, she felt it, that great tug. It sucked her down, deep down under the water, down, 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 and out into anew, out into the fairy realm. When she opened her eyes, it was bright white light. All around her were the faces of the fair folk, the faces of the Tulwith Teg. She sat up. They parted like a wave. And there in front of her was the wild stranger wrapped in oilskins. She went to him. He took her hand. He led her up a little path, up some steps into his room. And in that room they made love. When she woke up the next morning, there was his face next to her. She placed her hand on his face. "I don't even know your name," he said. "Yes, you do. I am your brother, and you are mine. I am Gwyn ap Neath." Now, a strange thing happens in anew when you go down there. Time changes. So while she'd been sleeping there for just one night, up on the surface of the lake, 7 years had gone by. And for 7 years, Gwythyr had been patrolling this lake. Waiting, waiting, waiting. He knew who that stranger had been. And then sure enough, it was May Day, and up out of the water came Gwyn ap Neath. And this battle erupted between them. You've never seen anything like it. Hailstones battering down, great sun beating down. For 7 long hours this battle went on. Each of them fighting over Creddilad, each wanting to keep her for themselves. And then all of a sudden up out of the water came Creddilad. "Stop," she shouted. "Stop fighting over me. I wish to be the possession of no man. I love you both. Gwythyr, you can have me for the summer months. Gwyn, you can have me for the winter months, and in the spring and in the autumn, I will do whatever I please. I will be free as a bird." But these 2 men, they were hot for fighting, and they wanted to continue. "Okay," she said, "if you want to continue fighting, then you can continue fighting." And so they did. Just for one day, though, just for one day a year, on May Day Eve, summer and winter fight for Creddilad. And they will continue to fight. They will continue to fight until the end of days. And maybe then the winner of the battle will get to keep Creddilad. Or maybe they won't. Who knows? Thank you.
Hello, everybody. How are you today? May Eve. Oh my goodness. It is the time of magic, the time of coalescence. And Brendan, he sat outside the front of his cottage and he looked at where he had decorated the place that went between, the liminal space, the space between the front door and the outside world. He had strewn the flowers there to keep the good luck in, for he knew the fair folk, they could not pass those flowers. On the strains of the wind, he heard the old songs. Bring flowers of the fairest, bring flowers of the rarest, from garden and woodland and hillside and vale. Our full hearts are swelling, our glad voices telling the praise of the loveliest rose of the vale. came to him on the strains of the wind, and he looked deep into his fire to see there the stories of old. This fire could not be lit until the fire on the hill of Ishnock had been lit first. A call out to David Clark, who for the second year must light the fire on the hill of Ishnock under the COVID cloud, and Éire waits for that fire to be lit. And Brendan looked into his Mayfire now, into the roots of the fire, and he remembered the stories of old. Wash your face in the May day dew, and it will keep you fresh for the rest of the year. Don't let anyone pull a rope through your land or say the words, Tar Cuam, Tar Cuam, for all your good luck will go with them. He looked around the fields now. Nobody out, as the sun went down over the hedge and over the horizon. And then he heard it. He heard the beat, almost as if he was hearing a heartbeat. He could hear it, but he could see nothing until he could see more. He was looking deep down into the dark brown liquid eyes of Anconine the rabbit, and she looked at him urgently, letting him know without words, I need help. Hide me, I need help. Hide me now. So he brought her into his cottage and he put her under the bed. And then he heard the hoofs making such noise on the ground that they tore up the grass and the gentle first flowers of May. And a man stood before him, demanding with a twisted face, twisted with rage. Where is she? He said. Where is she, the shape-shifting woman? Where is she? And Brendan looked back at him nonchalantly and said, I know not of who you're talking. She of the brown eyes, he said. She of the blood of the she, of the fair folk. Where is she? I know not, said Brendan one more time. And as in all stories, he was asked a third time. Do you know where the woman is? She is not for you. Where is the woman? I don't know of who you're talking, said Brendan truthfully, for he had seen no woman. And then the man took off over the fields and out of sight. And he went into his room, and where before sunset there had been a rabbit cowering under his bed, there was a beautiful woman lying on his bed, looking terrified. Thank you for your help, said Deirdre. Thank you so much. I will remember you always. And then she got up and with her rabbit speed tried to get around him and out through the door. But he was too quick and he closed it. The flowers are in the lintel, he said. The flowers are in the doorway. You cannot get past. Not without your permission, she said. Clear it for me, please, clear it for me. I can't, he said. I can't let you go without knowing your story. I'm enchanted, she said, the words coming out in a breath as if it was against her will. I'm enchanted and doomed to be woman at night and rabbit during the day. What can break it, he said. What can break this? Nothing I know of, she said, for if I knew of the answer, I would have applied it before now. Stay with me, he said. Stay with me and I will treat you well. She thought about that. She looked into his eyes. She saw the kindness there and the suaveness. Suaveness is a word that does not have an English translation. It means peace. It means my home. She had found her peace and her home in the eyes of this man whose name was Brendan. I'll stay, she said. And then they had a beautiful year, for May Day was over. The veils had thinned and thickened again, and the man could not come looking for her during the year. But as the next May Day came, she began to be nervous. She began to lose weight. She began to lose appetite. She began to lose interest. Oh my goodness, he shall come again. He'll come again, she said. He'll come again. It was February, and a fear was high in her. And Brendan went out and to the edge of his land, and he whispered to the bees, and he told them everything. Biach, he called them, Biach, and he told them the story of his beautiful woman who was afraid, who was rabbit by day, and his woman, his ban by night. And the bees listened in their slumber, and one bee came out with tired eyes to look at him, to let him know the bees had heard the news. And this man, he was so kind to the bees. On the last day of February, he brought the sugar water made from the flowers, and he left it for them so that they would have sustenance in the first days of their new beginning. He made sure that nobody cut the dandelions, the first food of the bees, and they grew high around his house to feed them. He was kind to them, and now he needed their help. When May Day was coming, the honey was flowing and life was thriving in the hive at the edge of the land of Brendan. Bzzz, they said, talking to one another, telling one another Brendan's tale. Bzzz, they said, coming up with the solution that would solve everything. They flew then to Brendan's house. They landed everywhere, on his hands, on his face, in his hair, and the woman was afraid. Be not afraid, my love. These are our friends, he said. These are our friends. They whispered to Brendan, who could understand on Tianach Biach, the language of the bees. They said, so busy. They are instructing us, he said. They are instructing us to stay inside the door. We must stay by the fire on this May Eve. It is against all I have learned. I will cast the flowers on the door, but no one may come in, and I may not go out, and I may not light the fire from the hill of Ishnok. Okay, she said, nervous but reassured. I will lie under the bed, she said. I am afraid I will lie under the bed. And as the sun rose on May Day, she took the form of the beautiful silky rabbit and climbed under the bed, and there she stayed. And as the sun was going down, he could hear again the loud knock on the door. What is it? He said. Come now, said the man, and he went out again to the angry, twisty face, careful not to step over the doorway, careful not to break the line of the flowers, and he opened the door. How can I help you? He said. You have seen the woman, the man said, spittle flying from his mouth. You have seen her. You know she's not yours. Give her back to me. And he could feel the little rabbit cowering under the bed. Get from my door, said the man. I'll ask you again, he said. Give me that woman, or it will be the worse for you. We will not forget, and we will not leave you alone. Get from my door in the name of Beltane, in the name of Ishnuk, in the name of all that is good in Era. Leave my door, he said. I must ask you one more time, one more chance. Hand over the woman, he said. I will not, said Brandon. She is my woman, Movan. She will marry me. The man was full of rage, but then they could see the power of the gentle little flowers on the doorway, because he could not cross the threshold. He got back on his horse and he took away across the field, roaring back curses and threats and saying he would come again with allies. They stayed in the cottage all that night, observing the words of the bees. And in the morning they expected to look out the window and see the hordes coming across the field. But no one came. The flowers seemed more colourful. The little herbs seemed fatter and more succulent. The chickens had laid more eggs than ever before, and the goats were waiting to be milked. The sun shone down, promising that summer had come to the land of Ireland. Brendan opened the door and went out, and a neighbour passed, rushing with a cart. What's happening? He said. What's happening? Oh, a man, he said. He came to the River Lee, but he didn't cross it. Why's that? Said Brendan. Well, he was attacked. He was attacked by a swarm of bees. He didn't even see them coming. First they took his eyes, then they swole his tongue, then they kept biting into the heart of the man. What magic is this? I'm sure no one would deserve anything like that. Brendan, he kept his thoughts to himself, and in his head he sent up a silent prayer to the beautiful bees. And when he could, he went to the edge of the land and whispered his thanks. Beltane honna Eve Golair, a beautiful May Eve to all of you.
Grosjean and clear, Grosjean all that, Grosjean and clear, Grosjean all that, Grosjean and clear, Grosjean all that. Vein du alles, ars javore. Vein du alles, ars javore. At last, she can rest. At last, she can down tools because her work is over. Winter Witch, Queen of the Weather, the Cailleach is finished for now. She can take her staff of power, which she can use to tap the ground, and it'll freeze in an instant, which she can use to plunge into the earth and draw forth a well from which her animals, the deer, can drink. She'll take her staff now and she'll put it in the shed, or the giant goddess equivalent of a shed. Her time is over. She can down tools. She can take her rocks, her granite rocks that she uses to smash into the sea, to invigorate it for the next year to come. She can take these rocks and she can put them in her creel and she can place that to the side, neat and tidy. She is finished. She can take her hammer of power. On one side, a wolf, and on the other, a lightning bolt. She was the original thunder goddess. And if she struck the earth, thunder would boom. And if she hit hard rock, lightning across the sky. She used this hammer to carve Scotland. She sculpted the coastlines and the islands and the mountains. She was an architect. She crafted the land I'm cradled in right now. But she can down her tools. She can put her hammer of power aside for now because it's no longer her time. It's time for bread. But I wonder if maybe once, if maybe once she didn't quite lock her shed. She left her tools out after winter was over and into spring. And when she climbed into the mountain range, where she sleeps with her husband, the Cairngorm mountain range, she's that kind of woman. She's married to a mountain range. When she climbs into the Cairngorms and is embraced by her husband, the mountains, and she herself turns into stone, I wonder if once she left her hammer outside. And I wonder if people from the Northlands came up these sea lochs and they found that hammer and they looked at it and they said, what is this? This is a mighty, mighty tool. It must belong to some sort of god, to some sort of war god. It must belong to the greatest of God that there's ever have been. And it didn't pop into their head that perhaps it belonged to an old woman. No, no, no. They thought it belonged to Thor. And they took the hammer back to the Northlands. And I'm not saying it doesn't suit Thor. I'm just suggesting that potentially it wasn't his in the first place. But with that, we'll move on now. We'll have a little break. I'd like you all to get a drink, stretch your legs, enjoy 10 minutes, and come back for the second half when we've got some brilliant storytellers, poets, and musicians to entertain us for the next hour or so. So have a little break and we'll see you all soon. Aster, do you want to put Lee back on?
spiders get drop caught in wings. Forever laughing as life is vibrating, careless and free, the turn of spring, set between motions and the light of day. Found in the moment and the joy that it brings, calming the river as the silence sings. Expressions of movement that flow in between tides of our times and the things we've seen. And may all this be but a realization of seasons change. As the days go further from us, I can't explain how the weather is turning, but for all I can feel the rain. I'm falling from foreign seas and oceans far and wide. I outweigh the balance of our nature's divide. And so I go wandering. In bloom bring the winter in, one for the morning sun shoots it down the bend, carried downstream by the cooling breeze, from mountain tops to the wilding seas, thrown all the leaves out with their control, swirling through space by the air that they've stole, violent and swift as the darkness recedes. All is connected and life is complete. May all this be but a realization of seasons change. As the days go further from us, I can't explain how the weather is turning, but for all I can feel the rain. I'm falling from fallen seas and oceans far and wide. I outweigh the balance of our nature's divide. And so I go wandering. It's already the month of May, and I've been trying to find my own way. Every day just melts in one, and I'm just trying to find someone who can let all my worries float away. As I fall for her beauty in every way. We're dissipating like honey through the breeze. And I'm telling you now, can you see me? Can you see me? Oh, I see you. The summer has come to pass, and I have found the answers to the questions I've asked. So now I look onward as the days are closing in. Though I hold dear the people and places we've been, remembering the words spoken, the good times been had, I find myself through the good and the bad. What would I be without these people around? But all that I am is just waiting to be found. I am waiting to be found.
All right. The sun is setting here on May Day in Argyll. It's so beautiful. This is not a screensaver. This is real life. And I feel like Visit Scotland should be part of this evening. But brilliant. We're all back. People can take their time getting back and feel at home and make sure they're fully fueled with drinks and snacks. And we're going to start off this evening's open mic part with Lee. I'm really, really excited. Lee and I are, we're both from Ayrshire. We've got some other Ayrshire folk performing tonight, and we're working on a project right now with a homeless charity that I work with. I'm storyteller in residence, and Lee's helping somebody that I'm working with to share their own story in their own way. And it's a really beautiful little collaboration that we found. I think we're doing that on Monday. But I'll hand over now to Lee. Take it away. You know what you're doing.
Hi there, folks. I just want to say what an absolute honour and a pleasure it is to be part of this tonight, to be a songwriter and amongst so many great storytellers. Thank you for playing the tracks off my EP as well. The Trossack EP, writing the Trossacks where you are just now, and there's Shona, is on Spotify if you want to check it out. And the song Hunters I played earlier on is going to be released this summer. But I've got a wee cover I want to share with you just now. It's a song I've listened to quite a lot over the last year, sung by quite possibly my favourite Scottish contemporary female singer, Corinne Polwart. She sings, she does loads of amazing music, but she sings on an album with a band called the Battlefield Band. And they do this song called Shepherd Lad. So I'm quite chuffed with it because it's the first song I've worked out in my own original arrangement, in my own kind of key. And yeah, I hope I've done it some justice. The song itself speaks of a story of a shepherd lad falling asleep in his field after a long day and waking up in a fine May morning to see a lady wild and free and naked swimming in the river. And give him his dues, he's a gentleman to her and he's gentle towards her, but he's a bit baffled by the concept. To his degree, women should be in sewing the silken seam. So it's a bit controversial, but I feel like this is a great song from a woman's perspective, and she kindly tells him to get to. At the end, she says, I can't remember, but you'll hear the song anyway. This is Shepherd Lad by the Battlefield Band. Cheers for listening. once there was a shepherd lad kept sheep upon a hill, and has left his pipe and his cook aside, and there he slept his fill. He woke up on a river bank on a fine May morning. There he spied a lady swimming in the clays that she was born in. So he leapt up from his green bed and he approached the maid. Put on your clays, my dear, he says, and do not be afraid. Spit it for a lady fair to sew the silken seam, then to rise on a fine May morning to swim against the stream. Well, if you not touch my mantle and you'll leave my clays a-laying, then I'll give you all the money, sir, that you can carry him. I'll not touch your mantle and I'll leave your clays a-laying, but I'll tack you to the clear water, my dear, to be my aim. And he's taking it to the clear water and he's waving his arms. Put on your clays, my dear, he says, and hide your bounteous charms. He's putting on a milk-white steed and himself upon another, and all along the way they rode, like sister and like brother. She don't take her feathers getting she's turtled at the pen. Already stood a porter there to let the fair maid in. When the gates were open, it's so nimbly she stepped in. She said, kind sir, you are a fool without, and I'm a maid within. So fare thee well, my modest boy, I thank you for your care. But had you done as you desired, I'd never left you there. I will sew no silk and steam on a fine May morning. You can bide your time till your time runs in, so take the sash fair warning. I will sew no silk and steam on a fine May morning. You can bide your time till your time runs in, so take the sash fair warning. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have yourselves a lovely Beltane and May Day. You've all been absolutely amazing. Thank you, Shona, Daniel, and everyone. Big love to you. Appreciate it.
Oh, I'm already off mute. Brilliant. Oh, thank you so much, Lee. That was amazing. It was the same. It's one of our favourite songs by that band. I've also noticed that as the sun sets, you can now see all my tech equipment reflected in the window. My tripod is a ladder, which means my boyfriend can't get down from the mezzanine until we're all finished. So we'll keep him up there for as long as possible. He's laughing. We're going to go to Liz now, who's going to share a beautiful poem that I'm really excited about. I've been thinking about it ever since I read it the other day. So Liz, if you're there, over to you. And you just unmute yourself and then we'll be cracking.
That's better. Can you hear me now? Good. Fantastic. Yes, it's lovely to join you all this evening. I came to the last one and I loved that, so great to be joining in this evening. Spirit of Spring. In the clearing, in the gloaming, in the ancient wood, participants gather. Magical music weaves its spell. Reedy flutes and finger cymbals are grounded by resonant drums. Long dresses swirl as the circle dance flows, and from the center emerges an apparition. Green silk from head to toe, a spinning diaphanous stream. Under the growing moonlight, her face and hands reflect the green of new leaves that darkens as the moon is overshadowed by drifting clouds. and that spirit of spring.
Oh, it really is. Oh, you've just captured it so beautifully, Liz. Thank you. And I feel
you.
like everybody's stories tonight had an element of that, and I could feel it when I first read it. I just want to say thanks again to the Gathering Collective, especially to Kama, who brought us all together in the first place. She heard both
Thank you,
Maria
Kama.
and I on online platforms like this, and she thought, here, these ladies might have something to say together. And she suggested that we host a night, and that was back in, I don't know, September last year. And it's been really one of the silver linings of this COVID cloud. We've absolutely loved working together, and our family's just growing and growing, and things are starting to come out of it. So we're so pleased that you can join us and be part of this little community that's sprung out online through the Celtic Cousins. And I really feel like Liz's poem catches some of that spirit. So next up, we're going to Simon. I'm very excited. Simon's from my homeland, and he's a beautifully expressive and articulate poet that if you just close your eyes, you can see this part of Scotland, I feel. So Simon, if you're ready, over to you.
Thank you for that really lovely introduction, and what an incredible evening. I have been very excited all week to come and listen to it, and Daniel, what a start. I mean, you could tell I was just totally swept away. I think one of the biggest compliments we can give a storyteller is if you make us feel like a kid, and I have been a kid all night tonight. Thank you so much.
What a bromance. I just have to say, there's definitely a bromance blossoming on this Beltane.
And Liz, you have used in your opening line one of my favorite words, which is gloaming, which I also used in the opening line of my piece. Earlier in the year, I was commissioned to write a new poem on Scotland's national animal, the unicorn. And the criteria was that it was to be in Scots tongue. And the dream of the piece for the people commissioning, a local council, was that it could be used in Burns competitions for young people. I'm a primary school teacher by trade, along with all my poeting. So that's the poem I'd like to share with you tonight. The poem's called Unicorn Fair, and it features as the chorus one line of Gaelic. And we translate the line of Gaelic as hooves like a knife cutting the sky. And it was inspired by a book by a Scottish author called Lindsay Littleson. The book is called Guardians of the Wild Unicorns, in which Lindsay rewilds the unicorn. She sheds them of their pink and their sparkles and their glitter. She rewilds it, and inspired by all of those thoughts, I wrote this poem. And when I was speaking to Shona about the event earlier in the week about the idea of a new fire, rejuvenation, I knew it was the one I had to share tonight. This is Unicorn Fair. It was Jens upon gloaming when he laces took to roaming. We a keeking a combing our braille thistle thorn. Aye, and this is who it started when his siller barks were parted by a beast sae wild-hearted, wi a glinting, twisting horn. Cruin marskein, a sculpting and sparing, a Breton boldest unicorn. Stunning like a stallion built, browy muscles to a hilt, whar a silken tail spilt into a glen it did adorn, and its mane baith flowed and rippled, and neath a sky wi' stars a-stippled, for he dark on neck had tripled since the creature had been born. Cruin marskein, a sculpting and sparing, a Breton boldest unicorn. Horned courser at a helm, did he beast survey its realm, wi' nae threat to our whelm, and nae care to it'll scorn, just to spend its freedom arkin, till her neck was done wi' darkin, when we cloots and easel sparkin, o its lean did forewarn. Cruin marskein, a sculpting and sparing, a Breton boldest unicorn. Yet, afore a beast could flee, did we catch each other's ee, Yonka unicorn and me, in an instant shared, till torn and we baith a glisk o hope, did we lee that siller slope. Stravagan we elope into a coming o morn. Chrúan Marscaean a sculpting and sparen, a brecht and boldest unicorn. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Simon. What a pleasure. I didn't realise that's what the origins of that story was. It's amazing. I wanted to explode. I'm so pleased that we're starting to explore the unicorn, because we have this character so clearly in our collective imagination in Scotland, but we don't have many stories or many words around it, I think. I'd like to find out more. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you for dancing along with me.
I was. You've nailed it. Right, who we go to next? Oh, brilliant. Stephen, it's over to you. Now it's another poet, but it's not a primary school tone. I'll just give you it's past the watershed. I finished this bottle of Left, so it's appropriate. Over to you, Stephen, take it away.
Okay, that was brilliant, Simon. I'm lucky enough to be a member of Daniel's Roundhouse. And in one of his modules, there was an option to learn the Cailleach. Now, in my family, I wasn't allowed to speak Scots. And the moment I saw the Cailleach storyboards, I thought, now is the time to buy some Scotch dictionaries and start speaking some Scots. The Cailleach is known by a few different names, Bera being one of them. And you heard earlier that the Cailleach created Scotland, and she has a lot to do with the weather. The cauld, icy wind blaws doon oor and in atween the mountains, doon the glens and ower the lochs. The auld woman o' winter, the Cailleach, is at throng. She is ancient, a goddess o' gods, and where she gangs, there's ice and snaw and gales. She's got grey shoulder-length hair that sparkles with frost. Her leather's blue and wrinkled. She's only one blinker. Her teeth are reddish-brown, the colour of rust. Her arms and legs are gay scrawny. She wears grey clays with a dull brown shawl, and she is muckle big. Einich, she was walking home, her wooden staff in one hand. She was fair chuffed with herself. There was still snaw on the mountains, and the waters in the lochs were still giled. She made her way up to her throne, Ben Nevis, and afore she laid down her head, she looked up into the snaw blawn around her. Far off there was a harlow thunner, which to her lugs sounded like a lullaby. She looked forward to her predictable dreams of black and white, icy realms, where she was also queen. She awoke for a nightmare. Somehow colours had seeped into her dreams, and when she opened her blinker, instead of seeing snow, she saw an overcast sky lit by the pale yellow rays coming from a Solene whose head was barely peeping over the horizon. And what was that sound coming to her lungs? Sounded like running water. Up she leapt and looked out over as far as she could see. Sure enough, the snow was beginning to melt, and the clear waters coming together and running down the gullies. And round the edges of the lochs, where the jilt was now thinnest, there was the light green hue and new growth. "No," she screeched, grabbing hold to her staff. "My reign will nae be challenged." And using both her hands, she lifted her staff high above her head. Then using all her might, she brought it down, striking the ground hard. There was the sound and blast o' 100 thunderclaps, and around the mountain shook to their very core. and in the lochs cracks appeared in the jilt that cleaved their way from one end to the other. The clear running waters thickened and turned to jilt. Snow was now blowing all round the Cailleach, and the only sound coming to her lungs was that of the icy cold wind. That night, her dreams were as she expected, but over time colours seeped back into her dreams with greater frequency and intensity until a morning she awoke to find her hair was now golden, her leather pink and supple, her twa blinkers blue, the colour of the lift high above her head. Her teeth were white, the colour of mother's milk. Her arms and legs were youthful, and she wore green clays. It was the first of May, Beltane, and the Cailleach was now kent as bride. Ah, where bride went, new life began. New blossom and leaves appeared on the trees. The raw with its white-speckled fawn came down to graze on the emerald girse. The dukes and the swans hatched their broods out all along the edges of the lochs. The reed goose with its newly hatched poots fed on the young shoots of the purple heather grown on the side of the mountain. The grain in the fields began to sprout. Bride's pith was rising. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's really remarkable to hear people talking in Scots. It's not something that we hear enough. It's really, really special. What tell me a bit more about this. Like how did you find this story and how did you find the words for it?
Well, like say, I'm a member of Daniel's Roundhouse, and one of the modules was, there was an option, and I thought, just the word the Cailleach, because I've never come across it before, because I'm quite new to storytelling, and like I say, when up in Elgin where I grew up, I wasn't allowed to speak Scots, so it was all kind of like alien to me, and I just thought, this word, this Cailleach is so Scottish, so I have to buy some Scottish dictionaries, and it's so much joy to kind of be going through them and finding words, and I might have an English word, that when I started writing it, and then I thought, oh, I can swap that for that, and I can put the Scots words in the ears. So even telling it now, and as I go through the dictionary, and because I've got a few now, I thought, oh, I can use that one instead. But yeah, but for me, the words I like the most is lift for the sky. I think that's really, really beautiful, and jilt for ice, it's yeah.
It's an active process of rewilding the language, isn't it? Just like Simon was doing. It's not a passive thing. We have to actively choose to pick these words. I don't know if, Daniel, you've got a moment to talk for a second about the Roundhouse and what this is. Sort of still available.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks very much. And I must say, I'm feeling like quite a proud tutor right now, because I thought, Stephen, you absolutely nailed that. It was brilliant. I've heard Stephen tell this a bunch of times, and that was the absolute best for me. It was so embodied, so great. Yeah. The Roundhouse. So it's sprung up out of the online coaching I've been doing since lockdown began, and it grew, and I decided to create a self-directed learning site. I'm a member of a few membership sites, and I really like them. I think it's a great format. So I think it'd be great to have one for storytelling. So you pay a small monthly fee, and you get access to teaching modules that release every month. So every month you get 2 modules. One's study of a tradition or a particular story. So it could be Norse mythology, Trickster stories. One of the bigger stories from Mabinogion. I'm not going to break it down, talk about various aspects of it. So you get quizzes on it and so on, and you get suggested stories to work on. And then I also do modules where I take a video
of a like first-rate storyteller and kind of break down their technique and so on. So you get a couple of these each month, and then we have a monthly webinar with a guest teacher, with myself. We have a monthly story share. We get together online, practice what we're doing. We've got a community where people organize their own practices. We've got like a practice group based in America. We've got a practice group based in Scotland. And the idea basically is everything you could possibly need to learn storytelling, apart from just opening your mouth and telling some folks at home. So yeah, it's just been going since January, but it's really nice. We've got a really cool little community together of people from all over the world, mostly Britain and America. And if you're interested in learning storytelling or just having a bit more community in your storytelling, I'd love it if you joined.
Oh, thanks so much for sharing all that. I didn't realize it was so new. It already feels so established and so important. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Daniel. We're going to move to Sophie next. So we're probably moving into the gloaming now. I'll put that up so you can't see all my dishes that we haven't done in the kitchen in the reflection of the window. But Sophie, whenever you're ready, it's over to you.
So I'm going to take you on a little visit to Callanash. The Callanash standing stones, our Stonehenge, really. And Callanash, it possesses magic with our standing stones. And the reason I am guiding you here to the Isle of Lewis on the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, of bonny Scotland, of course. That these stones possess magic, mystery, and they are very, very accustomed to local witchcraft, especially around two young women I'm going to talk about. And this story is called The Cuckoo's Call. So there's two young women that had a beautiful friendship together, did everything together, and then they fell in love with the same man. Oh, it does happen, oh yes. This created heightened emotion where green, sludgy jealousy managed to seep into their essence of their soul. And this created anger. This created competition where their love for this man and their friendship was tied into a wedge where there was not moving it, there was needed to be change. So one young woman decides to get in touch with a local witch. She thinks that this is a good idea because not all witches are good, but this witch that she found did not use her powers to the greater good. She loved to sadistically take pleasure in anyone who entered into her sticky, smelly lair. And there was the witch waiting for her, and she felt nervous, but she had no other choice. So she tells her of her love triangle and her request. And the witch flicks back her long dark hair and grabs a piece of hair and turns into a belt. Not any belt, but a magic belt. Oh, she feels nervous, but she takes the belt and she listens to the instruction that she must give this belt to her rival, and that when she wears this belt, her master, the devil, will snatch her and take her away for eternity, thus leaving her alone with the man she's trying to win his heart. So she's holding this belt. It's a late afternoon, and she decides to walk through the Callanash stones. And she hears on this warm evening, early evening, she hears cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. Snap, love for this friend. Comes beating back. Memories come. It's May Day. Oh, she remembers it's May Day for what each cuckoo that lands and comes into the Isle of Lewis goes straight to the stones, to stand on the stones to give their first cuckoo call. The cuckoo call comes with spring, with new beginnings, and with love. How can she harm her friend? She has decided not to do this. And how can she rid this belt? So she chooses a stone and she wraps this large black belt and clasps it hard. And she stands back and she goes, "Oh, I've been so clever." That's what's happening. And all of a sudden, the stone bursts into hot flames. There's a thick grey smog and a screeching, a howling, and a real haunting, devilish. He's there. Oh, she runs far. And for 2 days, Callanish is just stagnant of smog. When it lessens and it subsides, she returns to see what had happened. So what she had seen is where the belt had broken, and just above where she had clasped onto the stone, there was a large breakage and it was onto the floor. For the devil tried to pull up the stone, tried to take it for himself. He had to take someone. If it wasn't a human, he had to take the stone. So this never happened. But what she saw on top of this stone was a cuckoo. Cuckoo, cuckoo. For the call of the cuckoo was so much more stronger than the devil itself. And you can see this stone on the Callanish stones. It's number 34. I don't know if I can do a little thing. It's the one just outside of the east of the circle where the devil tried to take and the cuckoo lend a helping hand with the love of spring. There you go.
Thank you. Oh, there's so many songs about the Callanish standing stones. I just feel it bubbling up. That one, we've got a tight schedule. Thanks so much. That was absolutely brilliant. I feel like you and Kama need to sit down and have a good chat.
Yeah.
I think you're very similar. So we're going to move on now to our penultimate open mic offering, which is a brilliant woman called Ailsa Dixon, and she is one of the youngest storytellers in Scotland. And both Daniel and I met her at an event a couple of years ago. It was my 30th birthday, and it happened to be the 30th anniversary of the International Storytelling Festival in Edinburgh. And we had the oldest storyteller in Scotland that's still working. I think he was 92. And then we had the youngest storyteller, Ailsa. So she's a really precious person and a brilliant woman and a brilliant storyteller. So whenever you're ready, Ailsa, we'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Shona. I'm from Aberdeenshire. I'm up here at the moment and it's rainy and horrible and dreich. And I'd like to take you on a little journey. So if I drive down the road outside of my house and keep driving south, I'll get to Aberdeen. And if I take the ferry from Aberdeen and head north and keep heading north, past Aberdeenshire, past Murray, past the Highlands, past Caithness, and keep on going, I'll come to the Orkney Islands, that great archipelago of islands that rise, those great green hills that rise out of the water. And I've done this ferry trip many times because my dad, he was a Stromness lad, born and bred, and we'd go up quite a few times a year. And we'd always, when we went up, we'd always take a wander down Warbith Beach, and that's where the graveyard is. So we'd go visit the generations and generations of my family that lie in the graveyard, and then we take a wander down the beach. And he'd always tell me this story ever since the first time I could remember. It was the only story that he knew, the only traditional tale that he knew, and he'd tell it to me as we wandered down the Warbith Beach. and he'd tell me that a long time ago, when his great-great-great-grandfather's great-great-grandfather was still just a wee boy, there was a fiddler called Magnus. And the fiddler was the finest fiddler in the whole of Orkney. He was so good, and he'd be practicing all day, every day, and he was in great demand. All the ceilidhs, all the weddings, all the parties, everything, they'd ask Magnus to come with his fiddle, and everyone would love him, and they'd be dancing till dawn. And when he wasn't playing out at a party or out at a ceilidh or anything, he'd be down by the beach. He'd go down to Warbith Beach, and he'd sit on the rocks with the graveyard behind him and the water in front of him, and he'd play in time to the wind and the waves and the tide. And that was fine and well and good, but all the villagers always said, Magnus, we can you like to go and play by the water, but on Beltane, on May Day, you have to stay inside. You can play all you want, but you have to play behind locked doors, because Beltane is one of those days when the veil between our world and the world of the wee folk is at its thinnest. And you know how the wee folk love a musician. But Magnus, he wasn't having any of that. He wasn't superstitious. He didn't believe in the trowies and the brunies and the goblins and the selkies and the wee folk. So, on Beltane, just like any other night of the year, he went down to Warbith Beach, and he took his fiddle up on his shoulder, and he played in time to the waves and the wind and the tide, and it was so beautiful and so good, and he was so lost in the music that he didn't notice the seals out in the water gradually drawing closer. He didn't notice as they slipped off their sealskin and stood before him, beautiful humans with green tinged skin dressed in seaweed, and just, they were the most gorgeous people you've ever seen. He didn't notice, so caught up in his playing, the trowies, the little wee people sneaking up from behind. He didn't notice the brunies. He didn't notice the fair folk. And when the piece ended, and he took his fiddle down from his shoulder and looked around, he was surrounded by all the wee folk in Orkney, and the smallest one, the smallest tree, came up to him, and he said, "You're a mighty fine fiddler. Would you come and play for us? We're having a great big ceilidh, and we need a fiddler like you." Oh, and Magnus, he knew the stories. He might not have believed them, but he'd heard the stories. He knew this was not a good idea. But the Trui went on. "If you come with us, you will have so much gold, you will never have to work another day in your life." And Magnus, although he was a good fiddler, he was a bit of a lazy man. He liked the idea of not having to work another day in his life, and weighing up the pros and cons, and knowing that he was at least 5 times the size of the little Trui in front of him, he said, Aye, I'll come play for you, but just for tonight, and then I'll take the gold, and then I'll be away come the morning." And everyone was like, "Fine, yes, that's fine." And they walked away from Warbith Beach, and they saw the great How, the great green hill before them, and as they neared it, the How split in two, and a great tunnel led down into the bowels of the Orkney Island. And Magnus could hear music. "Shine, oh, horn arrow, shine, shine, horn arrow, shine, oh, horn arrow, shine, oh," coming from below. And all the wee folk in Orkney crept down the tunnel, and soon the biggest and best ceilidh party you've ever seen in your entire life was in full swing, and Magnus was playing, and he was playing well, and he was playing fast. And the wee folk, they were dancing and dancing, and they shouted faster, faster, louder, louder, and Magnus played faster and louder, and soon he was so thirsty, he was knocking back beer, he was knocking back whiskey, anything they gave him, he was just drinking it down. And soon the morning came, and all the wee folk, they went about their ways. Some just fell asleep on the floor where they stood. And the wee Trowie, true to his word, came up with a great big sack of gold and handed it to Magnus. You played well, lad, you played well. Now, be on your way. It's the morning time now. We keep our promises. You're free to go. And so Magnus, with his fiddle and with his great big sack of gold, walked out of the howe and saw it close up behind him into a new day. And the day it was just dawning, the sun was rising. But he was sure he hadn't left it quite like this. As he walked up the path, he was sure that that wall wasn't there. As he walked further, he was sure that house's door was painted green, not red. And he kept walking. There was a house there that shouldn't be there. There was a tree there that shouldn't be there. There was no house there when there should have been a church there. There was so many things just seemed wrong. Could he have maybe have come out in a different part of the island? But there was Warburth Kirkyard. There was the gravestones. It was all there. And he kept walking until he came to his cottage. Oh, and he was sure that when he left his cottage, he did not leave inside the cottage a beautiful young girl with a baby sitting outside it. He was pretty sure he would have remembered that. And then a man walked out of his cottage door, a great man he had never seen in all his life, and he knew everybody in Orkney, with a great big beard, and he kissed the young girl on the cheek, and he knew something was up now. And when he went over to talk to the boy and the woman, they told him he'd gone missing 100 years ago. No one had known where he'd gone. They thought he just walked out into the sea, perhaps, or maybe had been so caught up in his playing that he didn't notice the tide sweeping in, and the older people by their firesides, they'd all whispered he'd been taken by the trees. And he stayed with that couple for the next few weeks, but he grew listless and tired, and he would just go off for long, long walks along the beach by himself, and eventually he went for a walk and he never came back. But if you go up to Warburth Kirkyard and if you listen close to the wind and the tides and the waves, you can hear him still. Shine, oh, horn arrow, shine, shine, horn arrow, shine, oh, horn arrow, shine, oh. Thank you.
Oh, Elsa, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you told that story. That's the perfect Beltane story when our world and the fairy world or the other world are so thin, the connection between them is so thin, and anything can happen. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. So we're going to move to Liz, who's going to wrap up our evening with a lovely poem, just like the one she started. So Liz, when you're ready, over to you.
I was glad you sent the reminder. I was so wrapped up in Ailsa's story. It was brilliant. So sliding seamlessly from a very young one to a much older one. So this is called Rebirth. And this time of the year, everything's being reborn. The fields around where I live are full of foals at the moment. There are mares giving birth almost every day, which is lovely. And the buds are bursting. And this poem sort of mentions things like that. And it's about Beltane, of course. Rebirth. Beltane fires flicker on hilltops, welcoming May warmth. Young lovers leap through the flames. Sap is rising, buds swelling, vibrant with new life. Hedgerow blossom spreads layer on layer of heady fragrance. Yellow flowers are scattered around homes by doorways to bring luck, repel witches. Offerings are left at holy wells. Children skip round maypoles, unaware of the symbolism. Morris dancers lead the Virgin May Queen to her destiny. So whatever that may be, there we are. Thank you. And thank you for all the lovely comments I had after the first poem.
They're well deserved, very much well deserved. So, compelled to go into the forest, into the deep forest of old, and breath in the air. Along the old warmth, becoming young, knock on the door and a giant might appear. And a best friend she's gone. We follow the drops of blood to new worlds. Under wave, the second wave, its Beltane will flatten the third wave. And away and away and on and on and on, and open the gates and bring out the armies. And I remember a love spot. The special places, those special places that have that feeling, you know, that feeling, we know that feeling. And there's straining that brings big and small things, storms and evening birds and coldness. And it arrives, wild boys shooting arrows, cold. They're long, long winters, and there's a harshness. When seasons changed, I definitely noticed a harshness in the stories tonight. One I didn't expect, because it's Beltane, it's about vibrancy, new life, but there was definitely an undertone about the environment. And seasons change and our world will rot. That's what we said, it would rot. And she says, stop fighting over me. Wait, stop fighting over me. Keep the good luck in with full blooms, yellow blooms, and light the fires, wash your face, hear the beats and tell them, get tea. We're in the gloaming, shed your uncomfortable glitter and rewild your unicorn. And what does that say? Oh, reclaim your language and feel the ground. Shift, re-alter, re-center as you do. Light, it rises. Licht, it rises. Roundhouse, actually work on the story and carve it into rocks, because we'll remember them for much longer. If you carve the stories into rocks, we'll remember them for millennia. And you can still see them, you can still visit them on the islands, in our special places. You know those special places, we remember them, we know them. The great house, down into the belly of the earth, and we'll dance again. We will dance again until the sun rises. And the future will look very, very different to now, but somehow very similar. And the old ways and the young ways, it's rebirth and it's birth. It's bursting time, it's May Day, it's Beltane. Jump over the flame. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight for this Beltane Festival, for this little bit of grounding in this year. And I do think we are all moving out of this moment into something more vibrant and something more powerful, and we can harness that. So thank you so much. And if you've enjoyed it, let us know and come along to the next one. I don't know who's hosting that, but it will be either Kama in Wales or Maria in Ireland. Thanks.